Hey, everybody, and welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Chris.
And this is Tim.
This is Adam.
And we're going to give our hot takes on the game that we just finished playing, Kemet, Blood and Sand.
Before we give a description of the game, I got some poll results for you guys. You want to hear a poll I posted and see what our listeners have to say about board games these days?
Absolutely.
Bring it.
So this last week I posted on Twitter a poll question about where people like to play games. I mentioned that my favorite place to play board games is at home with friends because I love to host game night. And I asked people what their favorite place to play was. And I gave a few options here. Number one was my house. Not literally my house, but the listener's house. Number two was their friend's house. Number three was a game store or cafe. And number four was a convention. And the results were kind of surprising to me, but maybe it shouldn't be too surprising. 70% said my house. So they kind of fell in line with where I am. I like to host games. 22% said at a friend's house. Nobody said a game store or cafe, which that did surprise me. And then 7.4% said at a convention. How did you guys fall in line there? What would your choices have been if you answered that poll?
I actually did answer that poll, and my answer was actually your house. And I mean the literal your house, because because at your house, I think you had commented in your Twitter post that when you have a game night, it's kind of sacrosanct. Nobody messes with you. They know to kind of back off and keep things quiet for Tim and game night. And at my house, it's not really like that. It's there's an uneasy peace that comes over the house until something comes up. But it's nice to go someplace where you can really have the comforts of home and still have peace and quiet and be able to play in a really kind of concerted and thoughtful way. What about you, Adam?
I'm with you, Chris. Tim's house is the best place to play games. Like if we're playing games and somebody comes in, Tim's going to chastise that person. There's like a constitution of game, like what to do on game night and things you're allowed to do and things you're not allowed to do. I'm joking a little bit, but not really that joking. I think there's a nice tone set at Tim's house that board games are super important and a great time. His family knows how much he cares about board games, and Tim's super passionate about board games, and I love the tone that he sets around hosting board games. It's fantastic. But close second to that would be, I don't know. I like having games over at my house. Had you over, Tim, and had some French toast. That was a pretty fun day.
I played a little on Mars that day, if I remember right. It was a 5-hour morning game session, I think.
We did play some on Mars.
Honestly, I'm a little bit surprised that nobody picked Board Game Cafe or something like that. But at the same time, I can kind of understand why that would have been the least popular pick, because you want to be able to spread out. You kind of want to be in your own space for something like that. I mean, I've played at game cafes a couple times, and it just doesn't have. You feel like you're going to lose your pieces. You feel like you're kind of crowding in on people that might be on other tables nearby, or even if you have to share tables. So I get that one.
There's no game cafes near me. There's one up in Glendale, which is maybe half an hour away, or maybe it's 2 hours away. If there was one like right down the road and convenient, man, I would be there all the time, just like hanging out and being like the loser dude, like hanging out in the corner, like, hey, you need an extra? You need an extra guy? Like that would be me. I'd be trying to find games all the time, but it's just not available around me. So
yeah, that was always one of my biggest disappointments with Long Beach. There really wasn't good game spaces there. Where I live right now, it's interesting already. I've found a game store that has a lot of game space, but also a really great game kind of pub, that serves beer and has great gaming spaces here. So I really appreciate that. I love playing at game cafes and game pubs, and it's such a cool experience because you got the game library, so you can pick games off the shelf. You can have people serving you coffee or serving you beer or whatever while you're sitting there. So I like that. But there is a trade-off. You do have random people around you. I was playing at the Game House up in Glendale, which I think is what you were mentioning, Adam, at one point. Yep. And I remember there was a full table doing like a role-playing game session right next to us. And they were just, they're really into it. So it was like 8 people making lots of noise and role-playing and acting it out. And so, a little disruptive, a little different than if people are playing in my dining room. And then also, with a lot of those places, you do have to pay an entry charge or an hourly charge. It's never too bad, but it's a fun experience. But it would have been my third choice because I like playing at my house a lot because I can control the environment. I can host, I can set the music tone, I can set the, snacks, and I just really enjoy that. But I like playing at my friends' houses as well. So a game cafe would have been my third pick. Convention is interesting. I've played at some conventions and they're fun. It's a good way to try out new games and things like that, but it's not like my ideal experience.
I have never been to a convention. I'm looking to break that trend this year sometime.
I've never been to one either.
Yeah, we should plan something. Whether if it's not in 2021, travel is a little strange right now, and being in large crowded spaces may be a little strange. But I think 2022, I want to hit one of the big conventions. I want to do like Gen Con or the Board Game Geek Con or something like that. I'll just mention we had one comment on this particular poll, and that was Rick Lorenzen, and he said, "I do enjoy playing at home, especially when we can have friends over, but there can still be a lot of distractions. At a convention, I can just get into a game and not even get up for a bathroom break, even if it takes 4 hours to play." So Rick's choice was a convention. And so to him, he's kind of getting that space away. He's like, I get to go there and just game all weekend. And I appreciate that. That's nice. If I was at home for a whole weekend, I'm not going to get all that gaming in. But if I have game night, it's like my wife and my daughter, they know, okay, it's Dad's game night. He's going to do his thing. He's going to have his friends over. I'll come over and say goodnight to him, and then we'll leave him alone. So... but if it was like for a full weekend, I can see why con is a great experience too.
Yeah.
That will wrap up our conversation on the poll this week. Let's jump into a description of Kemet, Blood and Sand. In Kemet, Blood and Sand, you're playing as mythical Egyptian gods trying to prove your dominance over the lands. Your followers will build pyramids to honor you, go to battle over temples, and make you stronger by praying to you so that you can use unique powers to support them. Each round of the game is played over a day phase and a night phase. In the day phase, players will take turns using a set of actions by placing one of their 5 action markers and covering one of the 9 basic actions that are laid out in 3 layers of a pyramid on their player board. At least one action must be taken in each level of the pyramid each round. The actions include praying, which increases their prayer points, recruiting by spending prayer points to add units into their city, raising pyramids by adding levels to one of the 3 pyramids in their city, buying power tiles by spending prayer points to add an ongoing special ability to their tableau of a level less than or equal to the level of their pyramid of the same color, and moving, which allows them to take up to 5 units, 1 space on the board, or spending 2 prayer points to move those units to any space on the board that contains an obelisk. Whenever 2 players' units end on the same space of the board, a conflict is started. Each player starts the game with 8 combat cards that have different amounts of attack power, damage points, and shield points. Players in a conflict will play one of the remaining combat cards and discard another one face down. Those cards will not be available to the player again until all of their combat cards have been spent, and they redraw them all. Then players can play one or more divine intervention cards that may add attack power, damage points, or shield points. Players reveal those combat and intervention cards at the same time, and the player who has the highest attack power will win the conflict. But then both players will lose units equal to the damage points that were played against them, minus the shield points they played. If the attacker wins the conflict and still has any units remaining on that space, they will win a permanent victory point. If the defender wins the combat, they'll receive a veteran token. Then all players who were involved in combat that didn't get a victory point will receive a veteran token. If the losing player still has any units in that space, they can either retreat them to an adjacent space, or they can sacrifice them for prayer points equal to the number of units minus 1. If a player has control of one of the temple spaces on the board after a movement action, they'll take a temporary victory point token. But if that space is controlled by a different player after a conflict, then the victory point token moves to the new controller. Players can also gain temporary victory point tokens by raising a pyramid in their city to level 4, but those points can also be taken away if an opponent takes control of the space with that pyramid. There are a couple of other ways to gain permanent victory points, but they're rare and pretty hard to achieve. After all players have used their action tokens during the day phase, the night phase begins. Players who control temples will earn extra prayer points. All players will receive some prayer points and a divine intervention card, and then players can turn in veteran tokens to recruit units, get divine intervention cards, or get prayer points. Then players will choose their turn order in reverse score order with the lowest point holder choosing first, and then the next day phase begins. It's worth noting that the power tiles that players can buy have very different abilities, and the higher level power you get, the more powerful it is. Some of the tiles include mythical creatures that can move with your unit and grant them extra attack power and other abilities. The game ends when a player starts their turn with at least 9 victory points, and the player with the most victory points at that time is the winner. Kemet, Blood and Sand was designed by Jacques Barriot and Guillaume Montage and published by Madigo Games. All right, let's get into the conversation about Kemet, Blood and Sand. So we're going to start with gameplay and mechanisms as always. Chris, I want to start with you. Talk to me about the gameplay and mechanisms of Kemet. What stood out to you in your first play?
So yeah, this is a game that I've been looking forward to getting on the table for a long time. I was really excited when we decided to play this one. And part of that is because I love area control games with a lot of combat. And this is a game that has that. And it's comparable to a lot of other games like Blood Rage Innis, etc. So we'll probably all be drawing a lot of comparisons to those games as we talk about it. And one of the main things, I think is sort of like the defining dynamic of this game, is that it's all about combat. It's all combat all the time. It rewards you for combat. It rewards you for being aggressive. And the map is small and accessible enough from pretty much anywhere else that there's rarely a turn where you can't attack somebody, and it probably isn't advantageous to attack somebody. So I thought that was one thing about this game that just ramped up the stress level to like a factor of 10. And in a lot of ways, that's a lot of fun. So Tim looks like he wants to say something about that.
Tim's cringing over there. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that you just called out the worst part of the whole game right up front.
Yeah, it really depends on what you like. But I mean, it truly does reward aggression. In fact, one of the things, a couple of mechanisms that really do that. One of them is that you can get victory points by winning a battle in which you're the aggressor. You get a benefit for winning a battle where you're the defender, but you don't get victory points for it. So that's huge. I mean, that's like, 9 victory points is a winning hand. So, every victory point counts. So that's a big one. A lot of the power tiles, Tim actually, interestingly, found a way to put together a nice defender board where he had some really good defense powers. But a lot of the power tiles that let you go out there and do big things are really geared toward adding things to your attack power, but only when you're the attacker, not when you're the defender. And I thought that really ramped up the stress in a good way and it kind of set the tone for this game.
I'll add in too that one of the things that motivates you to attack constantly here is those temporary victory points, because if someone's in a temple, they've got a victory point, but all you have to do is go in there and attack them, and you get the victory point from them, but you also get a permanent victory point for winning the combat. So you're really incented to go after people all the time. So that's definitely happening here.
So I want to take what Chris is saying and kind of split that up into two mechanisms that I really enjoyed. One was the combat, the actual combat mechanism. But the one I want to talk about right now is the power tiles. You're building your pyramids, which allow you, it's like a tech tree, however tall your pyramid is, that allows you to buy the tech tile for that color of power tile, if that makes sense. I explained that horribly, but hopefully you guys are following me. You have this little shopping menu in your hand, and you're like, how do I want to construct my engine? What do I want to be good at this game? You're kind of deciding your strategy by looking at this menu and seeing what's available to buy, and you can plan out your whole engine from these little power tiles that you get. And I just thought that mechanism was fascinating and kind of pretty unique for an area control game. You guys have any thoughts on those power tiles?
Yeah, I loved it. It's definitely one of the standout mechanisms here for me. It would have been the first one I would call out as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. Much better than the constant combat and conflict in the game. No, it's cool. It's a fun engine building mechanism. There's a market to it. There's a little bit of a race for the best abilities where you're like, okay, I better build up my pyramid to this level first so I can get that tile that's going to work really well, because Chris might beat me to it if he built up his tile. So, and you had to manage your per points in order to buy those points. You had to spend per points to build up your temple first so you could get to the level that you wanted to buy the thing. So it was a fun push and pull of what it cost you to buy them and what you were going to get out of them. And like Chris said, there's some cool comboing going on there. You can get a nice mix of things that are very defensive or very offensive. You get the creatures in there. The creatures are rad, right? Every creature kind of adds an extra unit to your combat and does a bunch of other fun, interesting stuff that's going on there. So the power tiles are definitely a cool mechanism here. Chris mentioned he wanted to compare this game to Blood Rage, and Blood Rage actually has some similar engine building, right, in the card drafting, and you can build up your clan power, your leader power, your monster. So there's actually some very similar mechanisms there. I think I liked it better in Kemet, and I'll talk about my overall thoughts of Kemet versus Blood Rage, but I thought that this aspect of it, the engine building and the kind of power building of it, was just more interesting to me. The restrictions about having the pyramids of the right color and buying only being able to buy cards of colors that you had pyramids for. I think it's a really great mechanism set there.
It definitely added a level of complexity that, depending on whether you like that or not, that's a good thing or a bad thing. But one thing about those power tiles that I think was exceptionally good in that it creates a lot of replayability is that there is a huge menu to play from. I think there's 4 or 5 different tableaus of tiles, which have, I think, 16, 50, something like that. a bunch of tiles in each tableau, each of them on a different color, and you only pull out 3 for each game. So there's a whole set of power tiles that you're not using every time you play this, and you're not even going to get all those power tiles into play in a given game. And I think, Adam, you said there's even variations within, say, the black tiles or the white tiles that or the blue tiles. So you can even switch those out so you have different options in there as well.
Yeah, to clarify, it is based on player count. So we only played with 3 colors because we were playing a 3-color game. But even if you're playing a 4-color game and 4 colors are in the game, or sorry, a 4-player game and there's 4 colors in the game, you can still only have a max of 3 pyramid colors in your set. So each player may be dealing with a different set of tiles they can pull from, which is pretty cool. Now, as far as the variability within the colors, when we looked at it, Adam, did you get the impression there's really only a couple kind of that will rotate out? So there's not a big variety within that color, is there?
Yeah, and I guess the Kickstarter box includes these emerald tiles, and I believe the variation there is that you can mix those emerald tiles in. You replace some of the standard tiles with the emerald tiles, so that adds some variability there if you're using that kind of expansion pack there, that module.
Oh, and I will say that even if there was no variation within the colors, I mean, just the fact that you had these multiple colors in a big set of cards or tiles within each of those colors, I thought would add a tremendous amount of variety.
Yeah, there's a lot to play with there, and a lot that's going to come up in different games.
So I'm just curious, one question I wanted to ask you guys, how hobbled did you feel going into this game not knowing the power tiles very well? Because I'll notice, as I mentioned before, Tim did a great job of putting together a hand of like really complementary power tiles, and I was wondering if you lucked into that, or did you looked at any of those ahead of time and thought through it, and how you think that would change the game as you continue to play more and more times.
No, I mean, for me, I didn't look at it. I didn't know any of the tiles before we got into the game. So it was kind of just like on the fly, hey, I've got this level of pyramid. What are my options available to me? And let me look at what's out there. But I did start to see what I thought would play best for, the way I play, which was like, I was like, how can I turtle and just like engine build here and try to prevent people from attacking me? So of course I picked some things in that way. Didn't really help me in the end, but that's kind of why I was leaning towards some of those things. I bought the priest and the priestess that helped me get more per points, and then buy things for cheaper points so I could engine build better. And then I bought stuff that gave me extra defense and shields when I was defending. It was more just about, I think, my play style and kind of leaning into that. I don't know that it was a good strategy, but that's kind of how I went after it this game.
Did you turtle, Tim? I feel like you had just as many attack fame points as everybody else at the end of the game.
The thing is that this game does not allow you to turtle. Not really. I mean, maybe that's not true because Adam turtled pretty well. Like, I think he didn't leave his city for the last 2 rounds and ended up almost. Well, he won, right? Yeah, he won because of just eventually building up his pyramids tall enough. So there are some options there, and we didn't go after them enough. No, for the most part, it just felt like those points were too available. Anytime somebody had some troops out on the board and you had a stronger army, you had to go after and get it because you got a victory point out of it, and they're so important.
I think I won because of superior strategic moves more than anything else.
It definitely felt to me like that level of constant combat would actually increase once we all got better at it and once we knew the game a little bit better, because one thing that's kind of a big deal from what I was reading and from what I was seeing in instructional videos is the ability to go in and take over someone else's pyramid, because then they lose any temporary victory points if you get to a level 4 pyramid, and you can then use their pyramid to buy higher level cards potentially than what you could buy on your own. And I don't think in that entire game any of us ever took somebody else's pyramid, and I was a little surprised that never happened throughout the whole game.
In moments of the game, I'm going to discuss an almost takeover of a pyramid that didn't quite happen. But yeah, Chris, you're right. We never did.
Yeah, I mean, there was an attempt, and Adam had a creature that helped him do that a little bit easier, but it wasn't an easy thing either, because I didn't mention this in the rules description because it's kind of a subset of rules, but if you want to go take over somebody else's territory, you first have to move right next to that building, but you can't actually get in and take it over. So they have an opportunity to come out and attack you before, or build up their troops before that you can get into their pyramid. So unless somebody really leaves themselves open, it's a hard thing to do. It takes a couple actions to do. So I think that's a good thing about the game, because otherwise it could be really frustrating that, hey, I just built all this thing up and somebody came in and knocked me out right away. But I agree that there's probably a good strategy about putting the pressure on and not letting people sit there and just build up their pyramids and get away with it.
I think that'd be an interesting nuance with more players or more different color pyramids in the game. You could have your 3 color pyramids, and you could take over a 4th color from somebody else, and then have access to an additional color. I think that'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, for sure. So let me jump into what was my second favorite mechanism after the power tiles, and that was the action selection mechanism here. You've probably heard me talk about in other reviews about how I like restrictive action selection. Worker placement is a great example of that. But these ones that are kind of private actions, Australia did a very similar thing where you kind of had a set of actions that you could take on your board, but then you would have to put a token out and cover up that action, so it became more expensive for you. In this game, they didn't become more expensive, but you couldn't use it again in that round, and you had a limited number of tokens you could use. A couple of them could be duplicated, so there might be 2 movement tokens, or there might be 2 prayer tokens, or 2 prayer actions. But the more powerful actions, there was only one of in the game. So it was very fun to make a decision every round about, like, what am I going to do first in the round, and that'll be the only time I can do it. I can't buy 2 white power tiles because there's only one action token that lets me buy a white power tile.
Diamond.
Thank you.
Diamond
Thank you.
power
Thanks for clarifying that. The diamond power tiles or whatever, the red power tiles or whatever. It was a really fun mechanism for me, and I love that. I love that kind of. It's scythe-like too, right? Where you have 4 actions you can take in scythe, and you can't take the same one twice in a row. Well, this kind of did the same thing in a way. How did you guys enjoy that? That part of choosing what you could do on a round.
I really liked it. So you have these 5 little tokens, and you have to put, by the end of the round, you have to put 1 on each level of the pyramid. And it's great. It gives you, theoretically some quick, easy, choices laid out right in front of you. You grab your little token, put on the thing, do the action. So I think it's snappy and quick. It has the choices laid out. It does provide that restriction for you. And so theoretically, the turns are pretty snappy. And in some cases for us, they were pretty snappy.
Most of the time they weren't, but sometimes they were.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you guys said. I thought it was a pretty easily accessible mechanism, but it was restrictive enough that there was some really interesting decisions you had to make.
I was going to talk about, are we ready to talk about the combat, Tim? What were you going to talk about?
I was just about to jump into the combat, so
let's talk about the combat.
Let's get ready to rumble!
I really, really like the combat here. It's different than any of the, there's no dice. It's different than Eclipse. It's different than, well, it's kind of similar to Blood Rage, so I'll let Chris speak to that. But you have a hand of 8 cards for the most part, and you have to play one that's going to supplement your units and that monster, and you have to discard one. The one you play is open information, so people can track what you've already played, but the one you discard, nobody knows. So as you go on and further, you can kind of assess what cards somebody might have left. And so the combat is a very nice little cat and mouse. And one thing that we weren't too good at least I wasn't too good at, was realizing what's going to happen after combat. Are you going to leave yourself super susceptible to getting smashed by the next guy moving in? And how many move actions does everybody else have? Because the move actions are what's going to give that player a potential another combat. So those are some of the things that were brought up during combat. Chris, what do you think about the combat? You said you enjoyed it.
I really like the combat in this, in the same way that I really like the combat in Blood Rage. There's no dice to roll. It's all playing cards, and there's some real strategic decisions that you're making. And I think one of the things that I thought took me by surprise in how much I liked it was that selecting the card and discarding a card. I watched a instructional video on this, and I was listening to that part going, what the hell is that supposed to be? And why are we doing that? What's the point? But when I started playing, I was like, oh, I see now. Because my thought was, well, of course, you're going to always discard your crappy cards and you're going to keep your good ones. But the reality is, depending on what you're trying to accomplish in a particular battle, you might want to use one where it doesn't give you a lot of attack. It gives you a lot of defense. And part of the reason for that, which I want to kind of shift over to just really quickly, because I think it's a really important dynamic in battle in this game that also made it incredibly interesting and really sort of changed the feel of the game, was that they separated out victory in battle from casualties, which is not something I'd seen before. Going back to the Blood Rage comparison, it's basically like it's winner takes all. Whoever's got people standing at the end is the winner of combat, and everybody else dies. In this game, you can win a combat by having the most power, the most attack power that you throw down with your cards, but you can also lose all of your people. So you could win a combat, or we could have a combat, say Adam and I could end up with no guys left at all, so I don't get any victory points because I have nobody left to hold the area. And he still has 4 guys left on that spot, and I'm in a worse strategic position now than I was before. So you really have to look at it from the perspective of, what am I trying to do? Do I need to defend my guys and keep them on the board right now? In which case, I may want to play a card that has 1 attack strength, but it's also going to give me a couple of shields that are going to protect my guys. Alternately, it might be that this is the, come hell or high water, I need to win this fight. And there's a card in there that gives you 5 attack power. It's the big card, but you also have to take out 2 of your guys at the end of the combat. So it's the one where if you just have a must defend, you play that card. So I'm curious to hear what you guys thought about that, because I thought that was one of the most unique things about combat in this game, and it was one of my favorite parts.
First, I want to mention that the only reason Chris really liked the combat is because he had an infinite amount of divine intervention cards somehow in this game. So, of course, he won almost every combat. But no, I agree, Chris. I think that was a more interesting decision than I thought it was going to be after reading the rule book, the choice of what to discard. But I'm also going to say that leads into the biggest negative of the combat for me, and that is that just like Eclipse, which I think Adam mentioned, combat goes a long time and it's always between 2 players. Maybe once you get used to it, and in a physical version we played on Tabletop Simulator, which was a little clunky. But if you guys were going into combat, I would sit there for 5 or 6 or 8 minutes as you guys picking what card you're going to play, what card you're going to discard, what divine intervention cards am I going to play. I have to look at the tableau in front of you and the tableau in front of me to determine how much power I'm going against. And so the combat dragged for people that weren't involved in the combat. That was my biggest negative about the combat. Otherwise, I did really like it, though. I'll let Adam speak to that because I want to continue on about this. But Adam, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was a little draggy. And was that because of the system that's in Kemet itself, or was it TTS? Probably a little bit of both, and us being all new to the game and a little bit of whatever. But yeah, it did drag him. But to Chris's point, man, the casualty management, the defense and the blockable damage and the unblockable damage versus the strength in battle, it's all like neat different aspects of combat to think about. And I really enjoyed that kind of puzzle. It was a new puzzle for me, and I thought the combat was fantastic.
Yeah, that was a big learning experience. I agree. It felt often that you just wanted to win the combat, but then you started to learn halfway through that game, like, nope, sometimes you can win the combat, you won't get anything out of it because you're just going to lose everybody. So you got to protect yourself. You got to take out the other person's stuff so that they're, hurt more for future combats. So it really was a good balance there.
Yeah.
To Tim's earlier comment there, I do agree with what you said. And honestly, it's sometimes drag for the people that were in the combat, I felt. Yeah. And that's kind of a strength and a weakness here of this, because it's a really interesting combat mechanism. But one of the things that it allows you to do is, if you want to take the time and effort, you can look at the discards that your opponent has already used and try to compare it to your the cards in your discard to see what you have available versus what they have available. And if you want to put the effort in, you really can have a pretty good idea of what's going to be coming at you, other than maybe the divine intervention cards, which are complete wild cards. But that can be it can be great, because it's a cool puzzle to try to figure out, as Tim always likes to say. But it also can you can go down a rabbit hole. I think I had some times I spent 5 minutes looking over my opponent's tableau to try to figure out what cards are out there and what exact card I needed to play in order to have the right number. So it's probably not a lot of fun for the person sitting across the table.
That's a good time to do your grocery shopping and go on Amazon Fresh and pick out some of the newest items that they got. Or, look at the other power tiles, think about how you want to build your engine. So that's the kind of stuff I was doing. Or maybe I was just falling asleep while you guys were
playing your summer vacation.
Yeah. I'll just comment again. This is played on Tabletop Simulator, our first play. There's some other causes of that I'm going to speak to, but we played for over 5 hours for a 3-player game. And I think a big driver of that was the combat. Again, I don't think that would happen on a second 3-player game or 4-player game even, but I think it's going to drag more than a game of Blood Rage is, and that's one of the advantages of Blood Rage. You can knock it out in an hour and still have a similar epic experience, and it's just quicker and slicker.
It was long, and then that is a common complaint about Kemet.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons for that, why don't I jump into this, and then I want to get back to another point on combat, but that's the points, the way that the game ends and the way that points are collected over the course of the game. It's a very clever mechanism, but it also leads to some problems. And probably one of the things that I didn't like about the game As I mentioned in the rules description, there are permanent points you can get. You can get them by going to combat. You can get them with some power tiles. You can get them by sacrificing 2 people at one of the temples. So there's a few ways to get permanent points, but maybe a third or half of the points you're going to get during the game to try to get to the end is going to be those temporary points. And the temporary points come from controlling a temple, which there are several on the board, and people are going to be fighting for them constantly, for having a level 4 pyramid tile and controlling it. And people can take those from you. Well, the cool thing about it is that it's a constant, like, hey, we can't let Adam get that point, so I got to go and take a point from him to stop him from winning. The problem is it can slow down the game because everybody's going to be trying to stop the leader all the time. But it also leads to king-making situations. And this was my biggest problem with Inish as well. And I like Inish, but in the same way, it was so hard to end the game most of the time unless someone just got a surprise in or got a little bit lucky, because you can see when somebody's about to win. They announce they're going to win, and then someone comes and takes away that win condition from them. And Kemet has the same situation, because once somebody is at 9 points on their next turn, they're going to win. So somebody has to just go and take one of those temporary points away from them. And most of them, other than the pyramids being an exception, are fairly easy to take. It's hard to hold a temple because the max you can have is 5 units and a monster, and anyone can have 5 units and a monster. So I don't think that's the big driver for why we played really long, but I could see it being a pain. Basically, I chose who won the game on the final round, and I didn't want to do that, but I was pissed at Chris because he attacked me on the previous round, so I just went and attacked Chris and let Adam win it, or I could have attacked Adam and let Chris win it, or just not done anything and let Chris win it. So I don't really love that there is the opportunity to just have somebody say, I can't win, so I'll choose who's going to be the winner. And that's what happened here, and that's what happened in our last game of Inish, and that was one of my least favorite parts of that game as well. So
yeah, we'll talk about that last round later on in the podcast. But in all seriousness, I hadn't really thought about it the way you just described it, Tim. But I think you're absolutely right. I can see what you mean there, and that definitely did add some artificial ups and downs to the game.
The ending was a little sour. In theory, I like how you track the fame points in this one, and it seems cool, but the ending just was a little sour, despite my superior intellect and strategic play. It didn't, it wasn't a satisfying ending for me of the game. It was a little just disappointing.
So can I mention one of the other things that made the ending a little bit sour? And that's that we don't actually know for sure that you won, because the rulebook is so freaking ambiguous in so many areas that we literally read the end game condition rule in the rule book and then had to read an addendum to the end game condition, and we're not sure if that overrode what the actual end game condition was. And so we think the spirit of the game says that Adam won in the last round, but we don't actually know that for sure. And that happened constantly. We spent so much time rechecking rules and trying to look on FAQs and trying to see why some edge case rule would happen and another one didn't, that it was just, it drove me nuts. Like, my least favorite thing about the game wasn't even the constant conflict in combat, believe it or not. It was the ambiguous rules when it's not that complex of a game.
It's not. And I was gonna poo-poo on the rule book when we get to production, but if we're poo-pooing on it right now, even the designers know that there's serious issues with it, and they're already working on a new release of the rulebook because it is so ambiguous. And there's a FAQ, there's a wiki page on Board Game Geek, and there's attempts at all these clarifications, but we didn't even find one for the end game there. So I don't know. It's disappointing.
Yeah. Well, that's good that they are working on a revised rulebook, and hopefully it's something that, at minimum you can download, but maybe they'll do something like Stonemaier did when they've had a misprinting in a rulebook and actually send out a replacement. That would be really nice.
A lot of game companies are starting to, if they mess up with cards, they're starting to send out new cards or rulebooks. They'll send out the new rulebooks. So hopefully they do something like that. That'd be great.
This one needs it.
Let's do it, Madigo. So let me go back to combat for one more second. There's one more thing I want to call out, and that is that I think one of the other problems for me, and this is a me thing, this is not a game thing, because this is just how this impacts me when I'm playing games. And that is that when you're going to conflict here, you're attacking one other person. In Blood Rage, you're moving into an area, and multiple people can be in that area, and then someone starts a conflict. And so it can be a group of people. You're not really directly attacking somebody. You're just going after something that you want. And there's a little bit of that here, but as I mentioned, this is a lot of like, I want Chris to lose a point. I need Adam to lose a point. I want to take something from Chris. I need to take something from Tim. And it's very direct conflict, and that's okay, but pisses me off when I'm playing, even though I know that's the type of game it is. And it just can be so like, why did you just pick on? Did you pick on me because I won the last game? Is that what happened here? Like, it's just that constant like, I know you didn't actually need to go after me. You had to make a choice of 2 territories to go after, and you picked me, and it just hurts and it feels bad. It's not a big deal. There's a lot of games like this. I know you guys love direct conflict in games, and so for a lot of people, this is going to be a big positive. For me, I prefer when a game is like, you can have conflict, but I'm going after the thing and you happen to be in my way, versus I'm going after you directly. And I think there's a lot of like going after somebody directly in this game.
I think this is a matter of this is just a difference of how we look at games.
Yeah,
like you
for
were saying.
sure.
So for me, when I was going into a combat, I looked at where can I definitely win? Who is the most susceptible? It wasn't like, for me, it was just about, I want to get a fame point, and I think I can get one here. And it wasn't like, I don't like Tim's shirt that he's wearing today, I'm going to go try to kick his butt.
But Tim does make a good point, though, I think, which is a pretty rare thing. There's at least 1 or 2 times in this when somebody, and it probably was me a bunch of the times, I know at least one time it was, where there was definitely a singling out because there was something happening with that player that was going to, end the game, or was going to create some big shift in power or what have you. So I think that's a fair criticism.
I thought for sure Chris was going to start that sentence with, Tim was wearing a pretty ugly shirt today.
No, actually, I was going to start it with, Tim complains about getting picked on when we play Wingspan, so I'm not sure how much credence to give that.
Right? Like, how legit can it be when like everything is like, oh, you took my worker placement spot, you a-hole. Like, what? Come on.
No, seriously though, I think that's a fair critique. There's more of that here than in most other area control combat games I've played.
I think that once we kind of finish our normal conversation on this topic or in our final thoughts, we may want to compare this to some other area control games, because there are some similarities. And I'll just kind of lead that a little bit and say that that's one of the reasons why I like a game like Blood Rage more, because it's more about multiple people are involved here. That's just one of the comparisons for me. It doesn't necessarily mean I like Blood Rage more. We'll get to that. But for me, having to go after one person and then a conflict starts, that's a little rougher.
As a slight counter to that, that if you're going into a conflict and it's just 2 people, that third person is going to have a good potential chance to walk in there and come out with a point too. So you have to be really careful. You have to be really, really careful about going into combat and overextending yourself and having 1 or 2 dudes left, and leaving yourself vulnerable to the third guy coming and attacking, getting himself a cheap, easy fame point too. So while you say it is 2 people in the moment, that you have to think of the aftermath, I think, too, and consider that.
Yeah, that's a good point. For all the things I don't like about the direct conflict, and that I just generally don't like about heavy conflict games, I thought the temples was a really great way to kind of drive that conflict. If that's what the game's all about, the temples did a cool job with it. There were multiple types of temples. They had varying strengths. Some were harder to get to than others. And so it was a constant choice of like, do I pick the most powerful temple and make myself a target, or do I pick a weaker temple and maybe someone else will just go after the easier one? Do I go to the temple where I'm going to have to sacrifice 2 guys? It's a little harder to get to, but I'm going to get a permanent point out of it. That was really fun. Every turn it felt like, do I want to leave that in Adam's hands, or do I want to take it away from him? Do I want to wait till my last action to go and take a temple so that somebody else doesn't take it? So it was a fun decision point, and it was just constant. I don't think there was a round after the first one that there was a temple unoccupied, so it was just constant back and forth and fighting for them.
I'll add on to that with the day phase, night phase. So the day phase, are taking all your actions and you're building up for this night phase, which is where you collect your prayer points from owning the temples, or you can trade in your 2 guys for the fame point. I like that nice rhythm of the game, day phase, night phase, when you're kind of regrouping, cleaning up, and collecting your points and taking tally and reselecting turnover. So I think that's a nice little mechanism there too.
I'll counter that for one second and just say that I thought that unfortunately just added a little bit more complexity to the whole round, right? It slowed things down. You didn't just have a continual pacing. You had to pause, read through the 15 steps that the night phase took, try to make sure everybody was doing everything in the right order. Although it added some interesting choices, I don't know that it was worth it. And I think that's kind of a overarching theme of this game, is that somebody decided to add something else in that maybe it shouldn't have been added in, but it was interesting, but it doesn't necessarily make the whole experience a better experience.
Agreed.
I can see that where it kind of unstreamlines the whole process a little bit there. Sure.
All right, well, let's jump into the production of Kemet, Blood and Sand. Adam, you have the Kickstarter edition, just got delivered to you a couple months ago or a month ago or something like that. So why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about what you love about or hate about the production of Kemet, Blood and Sand.
It's in general, it's a beautiful production. The board, some people complain about the board artwork. I think it's fantastic. It's along the Nile. The Nile. I was trying to make a funny joke like, don't be in denial because this game is great, but that's a horrible joke.
Good thing you brought it out anyway.
Denial. It's not just a river in Egypt.
Yeah, the power tiles are thick cardboard. They're chunky. They're fantastic. The miniatures are all nicely detailed. I'm not, a guy that's into miniatures and painting them and counting all the little crevices here and plastic mold. Oh, you can see the seal of the mold here and this and that. No, the miniatures are fantastic and serviceable and nicely detailed. The board is great. Components are double layered. It's not like overly crazy. It's just a nice, simple functionality with the little tokens you're putting out there.
You said the player boards are double layered. Which part? Just the
So for the little prayer point tracker, there's a slot.
Okay.
And also for the color of pyramids that you want to build, you slot in.
Okay.
Like if you want to build a diamond, there's a little slot. Okay. You put that in there for the ruby and for whatever other color.
Got it.
It's not overly crazy. You don't need much on your player boards, but what you do need is there. Now, the one complaint I have about the production, it's the same as in it. Some of the little characters, the little figures on the map, have these like tiny, skinny little spears, and they get all like bendy and wonky. They're not like thick, chunky. Some of the guys have swords and they're fine. They say sturdy and they don't get all bent, but the guys with the little skinny little spears, they get all bent up and not all straight and they look all janky.
Hey, a quick tip on that. I've read that if you just put a little bowl of warm water and then you put it in there, it should straighten out for you. I've never tried it, but I've heard that.
Seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. Agreed. I would just throw it in the trash.
Just trash it. No, the production is fantastic here. Yeah.
All right. My biggest comment here again, because I have only played on Tabletop Simulator, but I've looked at pictures. I almost backed this game, and I kind of regret it, and I'll get to that in my final thoughts. But my favorite part of the production, I think, is the power tiles and how much it is just it's so artwork focused. It's a negative that you're just relying on icons and you do have to reference a player aid in order to know what some of the power tiles do, the first couple times you play. But I do love that there's a heavy focus on artwork and it's very thematic, and you feel when you've got this tableau built up in front of you that you're getting the beasts, you're getting the military strengths and all of that stuff. So I love when a game puts a lot of focus on the artwork in things that don't have to have artwork. And I'll compare this to Beyond the Sun is a great example. There's a special power there and it's just a white card and it's got nothing but text on it. Did it make it more playable? Yeah, probably. Beyond the Sun's probably more playable than Kemet, but it did sacrifice a little bit of what makes the board game hobby special. Kemet does a good job of presenting that in a cool way.
Chris, what do you think about the production here?
Truthfully, what can I say beyond what you guys already did? The figures are great. The art is incredible. I love the little multi-layered pyramids that you can actually build in the game. Just all of that just looks absolutely amazing. I love the idea of it. I've never seen it. I have not actually played it in person. I've only played the TTS mod.
It was disappointing that we didn't get to experience the true production of the game.
Well, yeah, that's actually kind of my point, was more that not so much beat up on the game, but don't play this version and say, well, that looks bad, so I don't want to play it or I don't want to buy it or what have you. I think the actual physical version apparently is amazing.
The one other thing I've seen in the physical production that I think is perfect, and that is the trays for the power tiles. Adam, how are they? Are they nice and sturdy, easy to hand around?
Yeah, they're about anachrony level sturdy, and they stack. They stack nicely too, so in the box. So you organize them up. You say, okay, what colors are we playing? Then boom, 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 dish those out, and they're ready to go. They're all organized by row for how much they cost, and simple. It's just distribute and go. It's so nice. Shifting gears a little bit, we talked about it earlier, the rule book. And I think it is just a translation problem. One example, it talks about the creatures and how I think the verbiage is something like, the linked troop or the tethered troop. Well, what the hell does that mean? So there's one guy that's attached to this creature, or no, in this case, a troop, and I think this is like a direct French translation. A troop can mean up to 5, a unit of up to 5 individual characters. So when I was reading that verbiage in the rulebook, I was like, what does that mean? A linked troop? That doesn't make any sense. And again, I think I had to explain that to you guys during the game too, because it's just not clear. It's not a good English translation. That happens in numerous spots in the rulebook, and like I said, developers are aware. They're coming up with a revision to the rulebook, and hopefully they get that out.
All right, well, let's jump into moments of the game. Chris, what was your most memorable moment of Kemet, Blood and Sand?
I have never had a more firm answer to that question than I do tonight. So throughout the majority of this game, I was lagging, and the victory condition is that you have to be the first person to start your turn with at least 9 points. And I was lagging behind. And I think at the point where we were getting ready to wrap up the game, you guys were both at, Adam was at 9, I think Tim was at 8, and I think I was at 5 or 6. And through an absolutely masterful series of moves, I bought a creature that was going to get me double victory points on combat wins. I made a couple moves. I won a combat. I took a temple away from Tim. And booyah, I'm at 10 points. And I'm like, I just won. And then they're like, oh, no. You have to start your turn with the 9 points. So sure enough, at that point, I was the last player. And that was the last turn. We go into the night phase. Everybody does all their little night phase things. Comes out. Tim attacks me, takes away my victory point, so that in the end, we actually all ended up with 9 points. But because Adam was the first person to start his turn with 9 points, Adam ended up being the winner. So, and that was the thing about that. I think it was Tim was saying earlier about the ambiguity that we're not actually sure how that it was supposed to have been resolved. I absolutely agree that the spirit of that was that, in the rules that Adam should have won. But I gotta say, I had a little bit of bitterness at that one because I felt like I did some crazy ass stuff in that last turn, and I was pretty proud of it.
So, Chris, would you consider that whole experience and the kind of ups and downs from it, would you consider that a positive experience for your gameplay and that type of thing can happen, or would you consider it a negative and that you felt like you earned the win and it was taken from you unfairly?
Honestly, I felt like that was the one solidly negative thing I can say about this game. There's a little, nitpicky things here and there, but that is the one solidly negative thing that I could say was that I felt like that kind of oddball win condition of starting your turn, because we had completed an entire round, an entire day phase. So, in any other game, that would have been, whoever has the most points at the end of, the round, you finish off the round and everybody gets their turns and then you see who's got the most points. Then it was that going in and starting your turn with the 9 points that kind of threw it off. And personally, I just thought that seemed kind of arcane and unnecessary. And it really did kind of, well, for one, it soured me on that particular ending. But also, talk about putting a target on your back and the kingmaking you were mentioning before, Tim. There was nothing, basically for you guys, it was, Tim got to decide who won the game. And that's kind of, again, didn't love it. I won't say yet because we're not talking about sort of like their overall impressions, how that left me feeling about the game overall. But I will say that I did not love that part.
All right, Adam, what about you? Any memorable moments for you?
Well, that last sequence that Chris just talked about was pretty epic. And yeah, it left me with a sour taste too, even though I won. But did I win? So the note we're talking about in the rulebook, it does say, the first person to begin their turn with at least 9 fame points and no other player has more points than them wins the game. And then the note says, so this means everybody else has one chance to take that player out before the end of the game. That's what the little note says. But Chris never had a chance to take me out, for instance. I think I read some clarification on Board Game Geek somewhere that was an accurate way, that the way we did it was, but we couldn't find it last night, so who knows. Anyway, the moment that stood out to me was I used my Phoenix. I flew down into Chris's pyramid thing, a level 4 pyramid, a juicy level 4 pyramid, a red one. And there was only 2 troops in there or something. And I was like, ha, I got this. Boom, I come in with my 5 dudes and my Phoenix, and I have 13 strength, and Chris has 3 strength. And I'm like, you puny little dudes, get out of here. But he uses these cards that end up wiping out all my troops. So my 5 guys are just blown off the map. I don't have control of the pyramid. I don't get any fame point for winning a battle. I don't get anything. And I'm like, oh man, why didn't I just use some defensive freaking points? And then the very next move, Chris goes and attacks Tim, and the same exact thing happens
Did
to
the
Chris.
same thing. I'm like, how dumb could I be?
Chris has all like 13 power strength, like just wipes Tim all over the place. But Tim crushes all of his troops and takes out all of them, so Chris does not get the fame point there either. So I thought that was a pretty funny moment in the game right there.
Why did I not learn Adam's lesson? What about you, Tim?
Well, less exciting for, moments specifically. There were a lot of big moments in the game. This is one of those games that just leads to constant, surprises and upsets. But this was just one of the things that I like about games in particular, and that was at the beginning of the game, one of the power tiles. It was the level 3 red tile, I think. One would give you just a permanent victory point, and it was the only one available in the power tiles that would give that to you. And I didn't really know what I was doing at the beginning of the game. I didn't know what was strong or whatever, but I know that 9 points is the win condition. There's a free victory point just sitting there, and only one person's going to get it. So my first round, my whole focus was I'm going to build up my temple to a level 3. I'm going to buy that power tile. I don't remember. I think Chris went ahead of me, so he built up his temple first, and he ignored it. And I was like, I swooped in and got it. He immediately built up his temple to a level 4 on the next round, ended up taking, over the next couple turns, some of the most powerful cards you could imagine. So I got so excited about getting that one single point, and Chris got things that probably gave him 5 points over the course of the game. So it was a fun, just the ability to kind of, see what's out there and try to translate what's the power of it and decide. I just love that. I love that puzzle of trying to figure out, what's the value of this thing I'm doing. Was it a bad move? I don't think so. I think it was still positive. We all ended at 9 points with just the kind of the tiebreaker win on it. So I did okay in the game. But I definitely think Chris had a more fun experience with his cool ass scorpion, knocking people all over the board, where I just had a single point token sitting there. So it was fun to me that I got to do the thing I wanted to, and then realized I probably didn't do the right thing. So I like that. I like that type of thing happening in games. All right, well, let's jump into our final thoughts and ask, would you request to play this game again? Let me start on this one. You guys know, and if you're a regular listener of our show, you know that troops on a map and area control, high conflict, it's not typically my go-to. It's not what I'm dying to play. There's a lot of negative feelings that come to me in this type of game. But this falls with me so far right along with Blood Rage, and that it's the game that I still really like. There's enough really cool mechanisms going on that it overrules all the negatives that come from the constant conflict and the constant Chris and Adam picking on me all the time. I can overlook that because I enjoy the mechanisms of the game enough so far. This is after one play. So at this point, yes, I think I will request to play it again. This is a game where if I was going to own a troops on a map game, right now this would probably be my choice. Now I'm going to talk a little bit in comparison with some other troops on a map games that we've reviewed and that we've talked about before. Blood Rage is fantastic. It's succinct. It's clean. It has some engine building. It has card drafting. It has lots of fun things going on with it. But the Euro mechanisms that Kemet brings in the resource management of your prayer points, the action selection, the engine building is just more interesting to me than Blood Rage is. And I think it helps counterbalance everything that Blood Rage does better at this point for me. So I really liked Kemet. I would like to play it some more. I don't think that I would want to sit through several more 5-hour sessions of it though. So if it didn't speed up pretty quickly on a second or third play, I'd probably be done with it. I think it would, once you get familiar with it, and if you're playing in a physical production, I think this game will run pretty smoothly. I'm kind of tempted to keep an eye open for this if it, when it comes to retail or if they do another Kickstarter or something like this, because I now kind of regret that I didn't back it on Kickstarter and don't have my own copy of it, because I kind of dug it. I thought it was a cool game. What about you, Chris? What did you think about Kemet, Blood and Sand?
Well, the short answer is yes, I would ask to play it again. And the real question to me is sort of the one you were talking about a second ago, which is there's some similarities here, a lot of similarities with Blood Rage, Innis, maybe Cthulhu Wars, those types of games. And the question I'm asking myself is, if I had to pick one of them, because I don't think I need all of them, but if I had to pick one of them, which one would I pick? And I had sort of mixed feelings on this because, like you said, there's just something so streamlined and efficient and elegant about the way Blood Rage operates. It's nearly flawless as far as a dudes on a map game goes. I can't think of any serious complaints that I have that made me say, yeah, you know what, they should have done this, should have done that. I think it's a great game. Kemet, on the other hand, I thought there were several things, and we talked about a few of them, where I felt like, you know what, that was just kind of unnecessary. It made it needlessly complicated. I don't know why they did this, or that part didn't really run very smoothly, or the combat had the issues that we were talking about with combat. And there were things like that kind of made me go, not ideal. I can definitely see a few warts in there. On the other hand, I also agree with you, Tim, that it did add some things. Some of those things, like the power tiles, were quite interesting, and I really enjoyed playing with those. So I thought those were a quote unquote complication that was actually very nice, and I enjoyed them. And ultimately, for me, a lot of this comes down to the theme of the game. Both have great artwork, et cetera, great minis. And this sounds so shallow to say, but honestly, Vikings just ain't that interesting to me. I mean, I love the game Blood Rage. I find myself so kind of bored by the art and uninterested in it because it's Vikings. I think I think that the Egyptian gods is a way more interesting theme. I like the artwork better, and I like the miniatures better, and I like the theme better, even though I think the game Blood Rage is a little bit better. So honestly, at this point, even having talked through it, it's really kind of a toss-up to me. And maybe the answer is I would want to have both of them because there's enough difference there that it would be worth having both. But I definitely enjoy the game of Blood Rage better for a quick, easy play. I enjoy the theme of Kemet better, and I like the fact that it adds a little bit more complexity to it if you're in the mood for that. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, for me, you guys bring up some interesting points. If this game is going to be 5 hours, that's a tough one to keep requesting over and over and over. Like I'd kind of rather do like Eclipse or something like that if I'm having a game that's, and I think we're down to like maybe like 3.5 hours or something with Eclipse with 4 players. So I think it would get faster, especially with someone being quick in the rules. Okay, night phase. Here's what we do. Boom, 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 boom. I think it would roll right through with someone who knew the game pretty well. Short answer, yes, I would absolutely request to play this again. I really like the power tiles. I see like all kinds of opportunity for exploration there and finding different combos, and you can exploit all these different little powers like you did, Chris, with your combat and 2 fame points and getting all these like points right there, and that was awesome. So stuff like that is going to keep me coming back to this game for a while. But if it does end up being longer and laggier, it's going to be tough to keep requesting this one. So I'm getting kind of rambly here, but to compare this with other dudes on the map game like you guys have been doing, Blood Rage is still epic and streamlined, and you know it's going to end. There's going to be 3 rounds. You do the awesome draft in 3 rounds and it's over. That's fantastic. Innis is kind of one of these open-ended ones. You don't know necessarily when it's going to end, right? It just keeps going and going until somebody meets the victory conditions. Eclipse, I don't know how it really compares with Eclipse. I think that's kind of its own thing with the Euro mechanisms. I don't know if it quite compares. There is dudes in space, dudes on some kind of a map. I don't know. I think they all bring something different to the table. But again, if Kemet doesn't bring down the playtime and get a little more streamlined on subsequent plays, then it's going to be tough to keep requesting it.
Hey, Adam, let me jump onto a comment you just made there because I think you actually articulated something I was thinking better than I did. And that is that Blood Rage has stood the test of time for me. I played it probably 50 times, enjoyed every single game I played, and I would play that pretty much every day if I could get someone to sit down and do that with me. This game I played once, and it seemed incredibly cool, but I think the real proof's going to be in the pudding there in playing it, a few times and seeing how it holds up.
All right. Well, that will wrap up our conversation on Kemet, Blood, and Sand. We'll talk about some games we've been playing or getting excited about, and we got a new segment to cover with you right after this. All right, welcome back. So before we jump into talking about some games we've been playing or games we're excited about, Chris is a little bit of an amateur mixologist. Would you say that's an accurate title, Chris, or do you prefer something else when talking about your?
Definitely yes to amateur.
Okay, so you're an amateur. Good, you're an amateur something. But Chris loves making cocktails, mixed cocktails, beverages, and he's great at it. When we meet in person and do game nights, he makes something that's kind of thematic for the night. So last night, before we were about to start our game, Chris texted us with a recipe for a cocktail that would go perfect with the game. So I'm going to let Chris take it over here and share a little bit about what you should be drinking when you're playing Kemet Blood and Sand.
Oh yeah, no, I'm all about theming in a game, and when I can have a themed drink that goes along with that game, all the better, right? And this one is a doozy. Not only because it's a great cocktail, but it also shares a name with the game that we played, which is Blood and Sand, for real. For the cocktail geeks out there, this one is a really old school drink. It's from the 1930 Savoy Cocktail Book, which is one of the 20th century's really great booze bibles. So in other words, we're talking about a real classic. Unfortunately, the name doesn't come from combat between ancient gods. It actually comes from a 1922 movie about bullfighting. I haven't seen it myself, but I've read that it's fairly unspectacular. But either way, tonight we're going to repurpose this drink and make it way, way cooler. And the best part of all is that this is an incredibly easy cocktail to make. You only need 4 ingredients, just 4. Orange juice, scotch, sweet vermouth, and cherry liqueur. The first 3 should be pretty easy, and if you're interested enough in cocktails that you're actually writing any of this down anyway, you probably have those in the kitchen anyway, or at least they're super easy to get. And in particular, with regard to the scotch, in my opinion, don't use your good stuff. The dusty old bottle in the basement, the one that you inherited from your grandpa, that's going to work just fine. The one ingredient in here that is a little off the beaten path is the cherry liqueur. This isn't something that most folks are going to have in their liquor cabinet, but trust me, it is worth the investment. What you don't use in your Blood and Sand is going to go great in other classic drinks like the Singapore Sling or the Ankle Breaker. The most common version of this particular liqueur is, it's called Cherry Hearing, and it's pretty widely available. I believe it's made in Denmark, but my personal favorite, if you can find it, and I could find it in California, so I think it's generally pretty well available, is Leopold Brothers Michigan Tart Cherry Liqueur. But really, any cherry liqueur or brandy will do in a pinch. And so in terms of actually making the drink, couldn't be easier to do. You're going to take all 4 ingredients, mix them together in equal parts, and add ice. The traditionalists will tell you to shake it with ice and then strain it into a coupe or a martini glass. I happen to be drinking these on the hottest day in recorded history here in Portland, so I shook the drink with ice and then poured the drink and the cubes directly into a rocks glass, aka the infamous dirty pour. And it was a refreshing treat and truly the taste of victory.
Chris, that sounds amazing. And if there was another poll about where to play board games, that's why you would be second to Tim's house, is because of the amazing drinks that you bring to the game night. That was fantastic. Thanks for reading that out.
I just want to have all of our listeners over for a drink night and a game.
Yeah, and I'll just say that so Chris sent that recipe over, and I got right on it about 15 minutes before game night, and so I looked at my liquor cabinet and realized that I was missing that cherry liqueur that Chris was talking about. Ran to the local CVS. They didn't have any, so I improvised a little bit. Don't do that. If you're going to do it right. So I missed out on the actual cocktail, but it was still a nice little mix that I had going on and fun to experience that with Chris. I'll just mention one of the things that Chris did, one of my favorite memories from Chris. There aren't very many good memories of Chris, but I'll just mention one of them. Just kidding, Chris. No, one of my favorite things is that when COVID happened and we started playing games remotely together, because we used to get together and game in person, and we decided to start gaming on Tabletop Simulator, kind of a weekly thing, and this is before we started the podcast. But about 2 sessions in, Chris is like, "Hey Tim, go check out on your front porch." And I walk outside, and he had left a cocktail for me to go along with the game for that night to kind of bring back that old game night experience. So, yeah, Chris, love your cocktails. So glad you brought that in here. Listeners, if you like this segment, if you want to hear other themed cocktails, just let us know. Keep us updated. Chris loves sharing this hobby with us and would love to share it with you as well. If you want us to bring these in when he has a chance to do that, we'll keep it going. All right, thanks, Chris. So let's jump into some games we've been playing to start with. Have you guys been playing anything new or unique this week? I don't have anything, so I'll be talking about some things I'm excited about, but any games that you guys have been playing?
This was actually a really big week for me, and I've actually been recovering from surgery this last couple of weeks, and just over the last 7 days or so, I've been able to actually sit up in a chair, game style, and I convinced my wife on Father's Day to play a game of Terraforming Mars with me, and she's not normally a big gamer, but I had the new big box components. Super excited about it. We got the game out, and now it's become a staple in the house. I mean, we played, I think this last Sunday, we must have played 3 or 4 games of it. Right now, she's killing me, so she is way far ahead of me in terms of games won, which I hope is a good sign that maybe I can keep her going. And then this week, actually last week, there was a sale at Stonemaier where you could get the Stonemaier Champions discount and get, if you bought Tapestry, you could get the expansion for free. So I ordered that one because that's one that we always played at Tim's house, and because I don't have a physical copy, I felt like I needed to. And that's one that I think I'm going to bust out next and see if we can make that another family favorite. So I'm super excited about that.
Chris, what's your variety of Terraforming Mars? Do you use any of the expansions? Do you do the drafting? How do you play?
We started with the very basic version, the beginner corporations, production of one. And then by the time we finished, kind of played it the same way that we all play it, the three of us, where we draft cards, advanced corporations, production of 0. The one thing we have not done is added any of the expansions other than the Hellas and
Elysium.
Yeah, an Elysium expansion, which Tim actually gave me as a gift. So we've been using that in the cards associated with it. But other than that, we haven't used any of the expansions. Although from what you guys have been saying, particular, some of the things that Tim has said to us about the expansions and how much he's become enamored with them, I think I'm really going to need to invest in some of those as well.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention it, but I guess I'll mention I did get a chance to play for the first time the Terraforming Mars Colonies expansion this last weekend. I also got the big box. I love it, by the way. I think I mentioned that in a previous episode, but I love the new components. I love everything that came in that big box. The metal cubes, the upgraded ships, the plastic domes on the city tiles. Went all in on the big box, and I love it all. But I also got all of the Terraforming Mars expansions, which I didn't own any of them before. So I busted out Colonies this weekend. I only played a couple solo games. I think I played 3 solo games with Colonies, and I really liked it. I thought it was a really fun little addition to the puzzle. I think it'd be even better multiplayer, but I'm excited to I don't see why I would ever play without the Colonies expansion in the future. So I've played Hellas and Elysium. I played Prelude, which is fantastic as well. This is my 3rd of the expansions for Terraforming Mars. And so far, all of those have been a fun fit to add some variety to the game. So
nice. Have either of you guys tried Turmoil, the Turmoil expansion? I have that. It's been sitting there. I have yet to try it.
Yeah, I haven't tried it. I do have it also. I'm going to work my way up to it. I think I'll throw Venus next in the next time I get a solo game in, and then I'll try Turmoil next. But I think Turmoil is really meant to be a multiplayer experience. So I just want to kind of try it just to see how the mechanisms work. But the next time we all get together, we should just do a full throw everything in the box and
everything
and put it all together.
Yeah, I feel like now that I have that big box, I need to fill it with stuff. So.
Exactly, yeah. And the expansions, I was actually kind of surprised because, as I mentioned, I just got them all at once. They're all in pretty small boxes, so there's not a whole lot of components. You got a small handful of cards, a couple little player boards. It all fills into that box, no problem at all, and there's still plenty of empty space. So, they're not expensive either. I would pick them up. Why not? Adam, anything for you?
I haven't played any games besides Kemet, Blood and Sand. But sticking with the Blood and Sand theme, Gale Force 9 announced they're going to come out with another Dune game. This one's called Dune, a game of conquest and diplomacy.
Whoa.
And it's kind of a variant on the original Dune game. So it's the same designers were involved. And my hope is that it has an unambiguous rule book. It looks like it's going to be much shorter. It looks like there's a 5-round maximum in the little picture here. It plays well from, looks like 2 to 4 players. So you don't have to have 6 to make it a fulfilling event. I'm just going to keep my eyes on it. I have low expectations, high hopes. That's Dune, a game of conquest and diplomacy, coming out, I believe, in September is what it says, by Gale Force 9.
Cool. So yeah, that seems interesting. So we'll have to see how it goes. If it compares to Dune Imperium in any way, as far as the quality of experience there, I'll be really excited to play it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Dune Imperium's so good. Yeah.
Adam, you've never played Near and Far or Above and Below from Ryan Lockett, have you?
I have not.
Okay. Chris, you played Near and Far with me one time. Do you recall your experience of that? What did you think of it?
I don't recall a lot of details, but I do recall enjoying it a lot. I thought it was a very interesting game. I thought it had some cool stuff going on.
So Near and Far was Ryan Lockett's second game in a series set in a kind of a fantasy world that had a little bit of a story element to some Euro mechanisms. I've never played Above and Below. I think it's a dice drafting game, but Near and Far is basically a little bit of a worker placement adventure race game. And it's one of these things where, as you kind of advance through the game, you're going to hit a point where somebody would read a story note, kind of a little bit of a story, and then give you a decision. Really fun element to what is a pretty, kind of standard Euro type of game. And I really loved it. But he just announced the final game in the trilogy of that series called Now or Never. It looks like just kind of an advancement on Near and Far. It looks like it's bringing in some Euro mechanisms, things like tile building, engine building, but then also has some of that story element, creature conflict. And this is available to pre-order on the Red Raven Games website right now. And I pre-ordered it the day that it went live. So I would, if you've liked Ryan Laukatt's games, especially in this series, if Sleeping Gods has got you excited recently, this is the latest game from Red Raven, and I'm pretty excited about it. I had a blast playing through the campaign of Near and Far and playing standalone games in that series. So I'm really excited to check this one out. It does come with a solo game in the box, which means I'll get a chance to play it even if I can't find other people that are excited about this particular game with me. So that's my number one game that I wanted to mention this week. Did you guys have anything else?
Couple questions for you, Tim. What's the hook on this, or any mechanisms? Is it just what's going on here? What's in the box?
So I get the impression that there's basically each player has kind of a standalone player board, and you're going to kind of be building up your own little city. So where Near and Far was an adventure game, this is more of like, hey, now you're trying to settle this land. And so you're going to be collecting from, I don't know exactly how you get them, but little tiles that you're going to put into your city that are going to be kind of engine building mechanisms. And as you complete rows, you get points. As you complete columns, you get certain advantages. So it's kind of adding a little bit of that tile placement, a spatial relation mechanism that a lot of Euro games are coming out with now. There is conflict in it. There's adventuring. There still has some of the storybook mechanisms, asymmetric player powers, and Ryan Laukatt's beautiful artwork and storytelling in it. So I just love Near and Far so much that I just felt like I wanted to jump into this world again and play with some new Euro mechanisms. So I haven't watched any gameplays of it. I've seen the components, I read the rule book a little bit, and it just sounds like a fun little engine builder that seems like it'll be good solo or competitive.
Is there any continuity between the three games, like a story or that sort of thing, or is it just three games set in the same universe?
My understanding is it's mostly just set in the same universe. There may be, because I haven't played the other ones, so you may find some characters that cross over if I understand right, but I don't think it's like, hey, you can't play this one without playing the previous one or anything like that.
And then do you have any interest in playing Sleeping Gods, or have you looked into Sleeping Gods? It's getting a lot of hype right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, Sleeping Gods looks really interesting. I almost backed that one on Kickstarter back when it first came out. And all the stuff I've heard about it, it makes me miss that I didn't back it, but also reminds me why I didn't back it. One of the things is, I don't really like games where you have to go and do the same thing over and over again until you win it. Gloomhaven was, that was one of the problems with that for me. And I know that there's a mode in Sleeping Gods where I think you can just play, and if you lose, you don't have to reset from the beginning. But I think the normal way to play is that you play, and if you die, you have to start back over and kind of redo the adventure. So that I'm not a big fan of. I don't want to go back and relive the same story that I've done. It sounds like it's a big open world, though. There's a lot of different ways to play. At some point, I might pick it up and play it. It still sounds intriguing to me, but it does seem like there's a lot to track, and it seems like there may be some grindiness to it that doesn't really get me excited.
Okay, cool.
Chris, did you have anything you're excited about this week?
Just getting my tapestry box in. I think, no, not tomorrow, the day after. That's my big excitement.
All right, well, I've got one more thing to mention really quickly before we wrap up today, and that is that just today, Czech Games Edition announced an expansion for Lost Ruins of Arnak. And you can go back and listen to our episode about 3 or 4 episodes ago. We covered Lost Ruins of Arnak. I really like this game, especially as a solo game or a 2-player game, and it's an expansion that adds asymmetric starting player powers and decks. It adds some new temple paths, which is one of the things that I feel like could get a little stagnant in the base game. It's got some new cards to add into the decks. So this does everything I want in an expansion for a game that just gives some new variety to the puzzles that you're doing without really, completely changing the gameplay if it's a game I already like. So I'm going to be picking this one up for sure. There's no doubt about it. That's supposed to be releasing later this year. So if you like Lost Ruins of Arnak, or if you've been interested in it, I'd say check out the expansion. I'm definitely going to be picking this one up.
Very nice. And that's like adds leaders. Did you say that?
basically the idea is that you kind of have a starting player power now, and then you have like an asymmetric deck. In the base game, everybody starts with the same 6 cards or whatever. And this one, I guess people will be starting with slightly different cards. Cool. Well, I think that'll wrap us up this week, you guys. If you are interested in chatting with us, just reach out to us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at BG_hot takes, Facebook at Board Game Hot Takes. Every week, we're going to be doing a poll on Twitter. So if you get involved in that, you comment on it. We'll read your comments on the podcast in a future episode. We'd love to chat with you and hear how you guys are thinking about board games in comparison to us. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Have a good night, all.
Bye-bye.